Under the relentless, unforgiving glare of the spotlight, the quest for eternal youth turns into a dangerous obsession. Celebrities from every corner of the globe, trapped between their fame and the terrifying fear of aging, have gambled their faces, their health, and even their lives on the scalpel. Today, we are pulling back the curtain to reveal the most shocking stories of surgeries that definitely did not go as planned. Lyn May. Beneath the dazzling yet often deceptive shimmer of the Mexican entertainment industry, Lyn May's story emerges as one of the most painful and revealing tales in the desperate search for everlasting youth. Born as Liliana Mendiola Mayanes, the young showgirl was just beginning to take the stage by storm and conquer audiences everywhere. That is, until she fell into the clutches of a person who, hiding behind a mask of professionalism, would seal her fate with a promise as seductive as it was dangerous. They told her, "You are going to look even more beautiful, more famous, and much more desirable." She was just a child barely 14 or 15 years old when she agreed to those injections that she was assured would highlight her cheekbones and boost her career. But nobody told her the truth. No one warned her that the substance being injected into her skin wasn't a medical product at all, but actually baby oil. It was a substance that over time would tragically and irreversibly deform her face. While the greed of others masqueraded as helpful advice, the innocence of a teenage girl was trapped in a procedure that would mark her life forever. And yet, even as her face began to change, her raw talent never dimmed. Lyn May made her big screen debut back in 1975, and just 2 years later, she was already a key figure in the notorious Feature Us cinema scene. She starred in more than 40 productions and became a bona fide legend, even as the industry whispered about the havoc that aesthetic procedure had wreaked on her. What is truly surprising is that she never gave up, she never hid away, and she never resigned herself to defeat. With a strength that felt almost defiant, she kept on dancing, acting and facing the public without a shred of fear. Her story didn't just end up as a cosmetic scandal. It stands as a brutal reminder of what happens when beauty becomes a currency and a young girl's dreams are placed in the wrong hands. Today, Lyn May remains as a somewhat uncomfortable symbol. She is a woman who survived her own cosmetic tragedy and shows without any filters the high price some pay for trying to stop the hands of time. A living, breathing warning that not every promise of beauty is wrapped in the truth. And what about you? Do you think Lyn May's transformation is really that bad? Type 1 for yes or type 2 for no. Alejandra Guzmán. In the gritty world of Mexican rock, few figures shine with the intensity of Alejandra Guzmán, but behind the scenes lies a story that shook even her most loyal fans. At just over 50 years old, the Queen of Rock had already undergone dozens of surgeries, always trying to stay strong, beautiful, and ready for the next concert. However, it was a cosmetic procedure on her glutes that transformed her life into a desperate battle for survival. It all began with a so-called miracle injection that promised to enhance her figure, but instead it ended up causing a devastating infection that ravaged her body. An artery burst, her health completely collapsed, and Alejandra had to be operated on twice in a single day. Doctors fought hard against the damage caused by a botched product, and the singer was on the verge of losing her leg and her life. Far from making her more beautiful, those interventions turned her into a target for mockery and harsh criticism. Her face, marked by Botox and constant touch-ups, stopped resembling the fierce woman the public remembered. But with the same raw power she projects on stage, she decided to speak openly about the ordeal she lived through, proving that even the brightest stars can fall into the dark pit of vanity. Today, her story resonates like a loud scream of warning. Sometimes the price of youth can be far too high even for a living legend. Meg Ryan. In Hollywood, where time seems to run faster than anywhere else, Meg Ryan's transformation struck like a bolt of lightning right in the middle of the red carpet. The actress who once conquered the world with her sweet smile and natural charm began to appear with a face that nobody recognized. And then the question that set everything on fire arose: what happened to America's sweetheart? Experts didn't take long to detect the telltale signs of the scalpel. Her once soft and subtle cheekbones appeared considerably larger, likely due to hyaluronic acid fillers or her own fat grafting. Her chin, retouched with a bioplasty that promised to refine her face, ended up completely altering the harmony that had made her an icon. What was supposed to be a subtle rejuvenation turned into a drastic change that triggered fierce criticism. The relentless industry labeled her with the dreaded clown effect, a cruel term that went viral instantly. People stopped discussing her movies, her immense talent, or even her cinematic legacy. It was all effectively gone. Everything revolved entirely around her new face, a painful reflection of the crushing pressure Hollywood puts on anyone who dares to age in front of the cameras. The passing of time had certainly stolen a bit of collagen and elasticity. Yes, that is true. But it was the relentless pursuit of perfection that ended up taking away that sweet, angelic expression everyone remembered so fondly. And just like that, with every single public appearance, Meg Ryan became the main character in a real-life drama. The story of a star who tried to stop the clock and ended up facing the ruthless judgment of the entire world. Today, her story still sparks heated debate. Was it a mistake, a botched procedure, or simply the high price of surviving in the cradle of glamour? The only thing for certain is that Hollywood never looked at her with the same eyes ever again. Lis Vega. Under the vibrant lights of Latin entertainment, Lis Vega emerged as a magnetic figure, a dancer, an actress, and a true symbol of sensuality. However, behind her impeccable poise, a transformation began to brew that the public watched with astonishment and which would soon turn into a storm of criticism. Her once harmonious and expressive face started to change bit by bit right before our eyes, and the question became inevitable. What exactly was happening with the famous Cuban artist Lis? She didn't take long to confess that she had experienced allergic reactions to hyaluronic acid, which she claimed were responsible for the inflammation and noticeable changes in her face. But her history with aesthetic procedures went much, much deeper than just that. With an almost defiant frankness, she admitted to undergoing a rhinoplasty cheek reduction and lip augmentation. These were procedures that in theory sought to highlight her beauty. However, the final result generated more controversy than admiration. Even so far from hiding or apologizing, Lis faced the criticism with a sharp, unapologetic stance. She said that anyone who wanted to see her as she was before had to resign themselves to the fact that that person simply does not exist anymore. It was a phrase that shook the media and revealed without a filter her raw decision to be reborn in her own way, regardless of others' judgment. In interviews, she even compared herself to iconic figures like Michael Jackson or the Kardashians, making it clear that for her aesthetic transformation is a personal right, not a public sin. And while some pointed out her changes as excessive, others defended her as a woman who is bravely remaking herself. In an environment where everyone has an opinion, but few truly understand the crushing pressure of living under the media lens. Today, Lis Vega continues to be a hurricane of controversy and bravery. Her face, marked by irreversible decisions, has become a symbol of the battle between identity beauty and the implacable gaze of the public. A story that reminds us that in the world of entertainment, reinventing oneself can cost much more than just fame. Lucía Méndez. In the golden age of Mexican telenovelas, Lucía Méndez shone with a face perfect for the screen, elegant, magnetic, and unforgettable. She was the star of iconic stories like Colorina and the return of Diana Salazar, and her beauty led her to become the first Mexican woman crowned Queen of the Viña del Mar Festival. But as time went on, her image began to transform in a very evident way, sparking both curiosity and deep concern among her loyal followers. Lucía always acknowledged having undergone certain touch-ups, but one of them would deeply mark her career trajectory: the rhinoplasty. What initially sought to be a discreet adjustment ended up altering the entire harmony of her face, a change that she herself described as a not-so-wise decision. From then on, every public appearance showed slight variations, a face that was tighter, more stretched, and more distant from that young woman who had made all of Latin America fall in love. The media didn't take long to point out that the diva was losing her natural expression, trapped in the relentless pressure to stay young in an industry that cruelly punishes any sign of aging. Criticisms, rumors, and comparisons became part of her daily routine. But Lucía, faithful to her character, continued working, defending her right to decide on her own image. Behind her transformation lies the silent battle that so many stars face: the fear of no longer shining, of not fitting into the standards that they themselves helped to build. And Lucía, in her attempt to preserve the myth, ended up facing a mirror that no longer reflected her true essence. Today, her story serves as both a memory and a warning in the world of entertainment. Even the most legendary beauty can become a prison when you seek to eternalize what time inevitably wants to change. Irma Serrano. In the universe of Mexican entertainment, few figures have been as imposing as Irma Serrano, known as La Tigresa. She was a singer, actress, businesswoman, and even a senator. Her incredibly fierce and fiery personality turned her into an absolute icon that was simply impossible to ignore. But as time relentlessly marched on, a different aspect began to dominate her story: the extreme transformation of her face, a dramatic change that left the public divided between total shock and deep unease. During her golden years of glory, Irma was the ultimate symbol of raw sensuality and an absolutely untamable character. However, when the inevitable signs of aging started to appear, she decided to confront them with the exact same fierce determination with which she had faced life itself. She turned to a wide variety of aesthetic procedures seeking to desperately stop the clock, but the results didn't always play out in her favor. Her skin looked increasingly tight and stretched, her features became more rigid, and her natural expression seemed to slowly fade away into nothingness. Every single new public appearance set social media on fire, with photos going viral and comments oscillating between cruel criticism and utter disbelief. Many people claimed that the Tigress no longer looked anything like the captivating woman who had once conquered stages everywhere, and sometimes she even seemed completely unrecognizable. Added to this was the eternal legend of her romance with President Gustavo Diaz Ordaz. This fueled the media attention even further. But staying true to her unique style, Irma Serrano never showed a single ounce of shame. She didn't hide, she didn't deny, and she didn't explain. She continued living by her own rules just as she had always done. For her beauty was a wild, untamed territory, not a social dictate to be obeyed. Today, her image remains a source of fascination and debate. The story of the tigress serves as a reminder of what happens when massive fame mixes with the paralyzing fear of the passage of time. Even legends can transform far beyond what is expected, but only a select few preserve intact the strength with which they roar. Jocelyn Wildenstein. In the luxurious and extravagant world of New York high society, Jocelyn Wildenstein became a phenomenon that was impossible to look away from. Nicknamed the Catwoman, her story combines intense love, dark obsession, and a shocking number of cosmetic surgeries that took her to a point of no return. It all began with a desire as deep as it was dangerous to win back her husband, a man who was passionately obsessed with felines. And so, almost without even realizing it, Jocelyn started down a path that would completely transform both her face and her entire life. More than 30 operations and around 4 million euros were invested in modifying her features to bring them closer to a feline appearance. Exaggerated cheekbones, stretched out eyes, and a sharpened jawline defined her new look. Each intervention moved her a little further away from her original image and closer to a figure that many found deeply unsettling. But it was a look she defended as a true expression of her identity. The cameras chased her and headlines called it a mutation, an obsession, or pure excess. However, Jocelyn never once backed down or retreated. In a world where beauty is usually dictated by rigid standards, she chose to break every single one of them without fear of scandal or public judgment. Today, her face remains one of the most talked about in the world. For some, she is an extreme example of the risks of the scalpel. For others, she is the proof of a woman who took personal transformation to the absolute limit. Whatever the perspective, Jocelyn Wildenstein remains one of the most shocking cases in the entire history of cosmetic surgery. A reminder that when love and vanity mix together, the result can be just as fascinating as it is terrifying. Sylvester Stallone. In Hollywood, where heroes seem immortal, very few names command as much respect as the legendary Sylvester Stallone. The world knew him as Rocky and Rambo, the indestructible warrior capable of defeating any enemy except for the passage of time. It was precisely that silent and personal battle that ended up pushing him toward a transformation that left everyone completely bewildered. His face, once rugged and perfectly recognizable, began to change. Until it became almost unrecognizable, suspicions did not take long to appear. Botox steroids lifts a list of procedures that, according to experts and insiders, ended up altering his features in a drastic way. The tight skin, the hardened facial contours, and the expression becoming less and less natural. It wasn't the Rocky that everyone remembered. It was a different version marked by the relentless pressure that Hollywood applies to those who live by their image. But behind that aesthetic search, there was a little-known detail. Stallone had been born with complications during birth that affected his lip, his tongue, and part of his facial musculature. That physical trauma added to the obsession with staying young before the cameras could have fueled his constant desire to correct and improve his appearance. At 76 years of age, far from looking rejuvenated, the actor ended up being the object of criticism and surprise. Many claimed that he was terrified of aging. Others assured that he simply fell into the endless cycle of the scalpel that so many stars have traveled. Today, the transformation of Sylvester Stallone remains one of the most commented on cases in all of cinema. It is a strange and heartbreaking mixture of silent, creeping tragedy and that relentless, never-ending Hollywood obsession with perfection. It serves as a brutal reminder that even the toughest heroes can end up losing the fight when they try to challenge time itself. And frankly, there is no amount of Botox in existence capable of stopping the public's staring eyes when they decide it is time to judge. Let's talk about the one and only Laura Leon. In the world of Mexican entertainment, there are very few characters as incredibly charismatic and wonderfully extravagant as Laura Leon, the unmistakable Tesorito, or Little Treasure. With her signature sensual voice and her absolutely explosive personality, she managed to conquer soap operas, dominate stages, and win over hearts everywhere. However, as the years rolled by, a new and different conversation began to swirl around her, focusing heavily on her surprising facial transformation. Even though Laura insists up and down that she has not submitted herself to major surgeries and claims she has only had a few little tweaks here and there, the reality captured by the high-definition cameras tells a completely different story. Her face appears much tighter, significantly firmer, and honestly almost too perfect to have been left solely in the hands of Mother Nature. The elevated cheekbones, the incredibly smooth skin, and that slightly frozen expression all feed into the rumors that she's staying true to her style, dodges with humor, and a bit of flirtation. Every single public appearance she makes generates quite a stir and gets people talking immediately. Her followers find themselves torn between total amazement and a deep sense of nostalgia for the tesorito of yesterday, that woman with tropical beauty who seemed to shine so effortlessly back then. But Laura, completely sure of herself, continues singing, laughing, and dancing away as if time could simply never catch up to her. In a world where age often becomes a harsh sentence, the tesorito proves that she can reinvent herself over and over again. Even when her image becomes a heated topic of debate with her transformation, being controversial for some and fascinating for others, it keeps her exactly where she wants to be, right in the center of attention, as always. Because if there is one thing Laura Leon is clear about, it is that with or without a scalpel, she was born to be eternal. Now let's move on to Carmen Campuzano. Back in the 1990s, Carmen Campuzano shone brightly as one of the most dazzling models in Mexico, possessing an angelic face, impeccable poise, and a career that was aiming for the very top. She was the absolute picture-perfect image of glamour until everything suddenly began to crumble down. Her transformation, which was as abrupt as it was painful, turned into one of the most commented-on stories in the entire entertainment world. It all started with health problems that, according to her own accounts, were caused by aggressive bacteria that gravely affected her nose. However, the public did not wait long to start speculating. Many people claimed that it was not just an infection, but rather the tragic result of botched surgeries and the dark chapter of addictions that marked her life. Her nose, which had once been her distinctive trademark, ended up devastated, completely altering the harmony of her face. The most shocking part of it all was the undeniable contrast. The woman who used to adorn magazine covers with an ethereal beauty now appeared with deteriorated features that generated worry, surprise, and sadly cruel mockery. Every single new photograph that surfaced went viral instantly. Each public appearance unleashed a fierce debate about the risks of vanity, the dangers of excess, and the crushing pressure to remain perfect. Despite absolutely everything, Carmen never stopped fighting back. She acknowledged her mistakes, spoke openly about her internal battles, and faced the world's judgments with a level of frankness that few would dare to show. Her story is no longer just that of a model who lost her beauty, but that of a woman who survived a brutal fall and is trying to rebuild herself in front of millions of staring eyes. Today, Carmen Campuzano continues to be a symbol of warning and also of resistance. Because behind that face marked by pain, the strength of someone who refuses to be defeated by her own tragedy still beats strong. If you have made it this far, get ready, because the next person will truly surprise you. With their incredibly dramatic transformation following plastic surgery, Michael Jackson. To speak of Michael Jackson is to enter into one of the most fascinating and heartbreaking stories in the history of show business. The child prodigy who conquered the planet ended up trapped in a silent struggle against his own reflection, a battle that led him to submit himself to an endless series of surgeries that completely transformed his physical identity. It all began with a rhinoplasty that seemed harmless enough. But what was supposed to be a small adjustment opened the door to an obsession without any breaks. More surgeries, more touch-ups, and more attempts to change that which he could never manage to accept. His nose became increasingly tiny, his cheekbones more pronounced, and his chin much more defined. Added to this was the controversial change in his skin color, a topic that divided the world and fueled headlines for years. Behind this metamorphosis existed a deep, profound pain. Friends and family confessed that his father used to call him ugly during his childhood, an emotional wound that never closed, and that forever marked his relationship with beauty and self-esteem. It is estimated that Michael went through dozens of interventions, some of them failed attempts to correct previous errors without success, pushing his face to the very limits of what looks human. What is truly shocking is that despite the undeniable and obvious physical changes, he consistently denied having any work done other than his nose to help him breathe better. That almost desperate denial really revealed the deep fragility of a man who is struggling to hide his own internal suffering from the world. His story came to a heartbreaking and tragic end in 2009, with an overdose of propofol, a powerful medication he had become dependent on, while desperately trying to relieve his severe insomnia and deep anguish. Today, Michael Jackson's physical transformation remains one of the most discussed topics in history. It stands as a powerful reminder that even the brightest stars can get lost in the darkness of their own insecurities. And ultimately, it teaches us that no amount of surgery can ever heal a wounded heart. Do you enjoy this kind of content about plastic surgery transformations? If yes, type the number 1 in the comments. If no, type the number 2. Laura Bozzo. In the world of Latin entertainment, very few figures generate as many mixed opinions as Laura Bozzo does. The Peruvian presenter is famous for her explosive style and catchphrases that have become memes. But she has also been the protagonist of an aesthetic transformation that left more than a few people with their mouths open in shock. And while many celebrities try to hide their touch-ups, Laura chose a completely different path, admitting it without any shame whatsoever. Over the years, her face changed little by little. Facelift here, a breast augmentation there, some Botox in the cheekbones, and Miss Laura appeared looking tighter and tighter. It was a more polished look, quite distant from the face the public knew at the start of her career. But when people asked her if she was doing it to look sexy, she would respond with pure irony, saying, I never pretended to be sexy, and certainly not at my age. Her sincerity disarmed many critics, but it didn't stop the conversations. Every new appearance on television became a viral topic. Had she exaggerated? Had she transformed herself too much? Or was she simply playing by the exact same rules that apply to everyone in the show business world? The truth is that Laura Bozzo always understood clearly that image is part of the business. And so between controversy, surgeries, and incendiary statements, she managed to stay relevant in a medium where age usually erases names with brutal speed. Today, her transformation remains a fascinating enigma. It is part pride, part vanity, and part survival. It is yet another proof that in the media universe, even the most recognized faces are willing to reinvent themselves, whatever the cost may be. Sabrina Sabrok. On the most extreme end of the spectrum of aesthetic transformations appears Sabrina Sabrok, the Argentine artist who turned her body into a project without limits. As a singer, model, and figure in adult entertainment, Sabrina never hid her obsession with the scalpel. On the contrary, she made it an essential part of her public persona. But that fascination ended up leading her to one of the most dangerous experiences of her life. In 2016, the bomb exploded. Sabrina revealed that one of her gluteal implants was leaking fluid, an alarming sign that something had gone terribly wrong. The product they had placed in her, as she reported, was of poor quality, and the damage was advancing to such a point that it put her health at serious risk. The artist not only had to undergo emergency surgery, but she even considered suing the surgeon responsible. Her body, molded by force of countless interventions, became a symbol of the thin line between reinvention and danger. Each operation moved her further away from her original image and brought her closer to an exaggerated, almost unreal ideal that many observed with fascination and others with horror. Today, Sabrina Sabrok remains a media phenomenon, a living reminder of what can happen when the search for perfection exceeds the limits of the body itself. It is a controversial story, intense and totally impossible to ignore. Justin Jedlicka. In a world obsessed with perfection, Justin Jedlicka became one of the most radical and commented on cases, known as the man who decided to transform himself into a human version of the Ken doll. His story is not just surprising, it is an extreme journey toward an aesthetic ideal that borders on the impossible. Since he was young, Justin dreamed of an impeccable body with polished contours and a symmetrical face. But what remains a fantasy for many, he took to the operating room. More than $500,000 and an almost uncountable number of surgical interventions gave shape to his new identity. He got implants in his pectorals, arms, glutes, and cheeks, along with rhinoplasties. Millimeter-precise touch-ups and modifications so specific that few surgeons dared to perform them. Every single procedure brought him closer to his ideal and took him further away from his original appearance. We're talking about implants in his pectorals, his arms, his glutes, and cheeks, along with nose job after nose job. Focusing on millimeter-perfect tweaks and modifications so incredibly specific that very few surgeons were brave enough to try them. Every single procedure pushed him closer to his fantasy ideal, while pulling him further and further away from the person he used to look like. The media started calling him the human doll, a title he actually accepted with pride, even though it sparked a mix of shock and heavy criticism. Some people viewed him as a living work of modern art, while others saw him as the most extreme reflection of our era's obsession with looks. Even so, Justin never backed down. He defends every surgery as a pure expression of freedom, a way to sculpt his own body just like an artist creating a masterpiece. But his transformation also raises a disturbing question. How much can the human body really withstand when it becomes a permanent canvas for the scalpel? Today, Justin Jedlicka remains a massive symbol of excess audacity and endless controversy. He is a reminder that in the hunt for perfection, some are willing to cross every limit, even the limits of their own flesh and blood. Yeah,